This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show on Thursday the 18th of May. I'm your host, Paul Hazzard, and on tonight's show I take an in-depth look at alternative provision, or AEP, as we call it here in Northern Ireland. Joining me to guide us through this thorny nitty-gritty is Lead Practitioner for Behaviour, Hazzard Ali.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. We had a lot of technical difficulties, but it looks like we might have got here at last. Or maybe I'm the only one here at the minute. Anyway, tonight I'm going to be speaking, hopefully, to Hazzard Ali about all things behaviour. A hot topic of the moment, very prickly, but for teachers, behaviour is something that we always have to come back to. We always have to think about it. And it's a little bit like the ocean. It's always changing. It's always dynamic. We'll be asking, has COVID made a significant difference in behaviour? And just what is the experience of somebody like Hazzard, who's very much at the cold face and dealing with difficult behaviours on a daily basis. So if you have any questions or if you have any comments or experiences yourself around behaviour, please put them into the chat now and we'll get them all lined up for when Hazzard does manage to get joined, which I hope is very soon. There's no sign of him yet, but I'm sure he's trying hard. So we'll be asking things like, what is behaviour? And what kind of behaviour do teachers need? I know when I was a young teacher and you went for job interviews, one of the things you always got asked was a behaviour question, as we used to say. And I remember coming up with the line, something similar to, in order for teaching and learning to happen, there has to be good behaviour. There's Hazzard now. Can you hear me, Hazzard? How are you?
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
At last, we managed to cut through. Thank you very much for your patience there.
No problem at all.
Good to hear you. Good to hear you. So, Hazzard, you work in behaviour. You're a lead in a school for behaviour. Tell us a little about how you got to where you're at now.
So, I'm currently employed by Bradford Academy. The school is based in a really deprived area in Bradford. So my journey started at the school in 2017 as a volunteer. I was just really interested in working with young people, especially from the district, and being able to give something back to the young people. So I wanted to see what it's like in a school setting. So I remember applying as a volunteer to kind of get a feel of what the school's like. 4 weeks into the volunteering, there was a position available for a learning support assistant. Applied, and then it was my journey started from there as a learning support assistant. From there, I moved on to working in our off-site provision with young people. It was back end of the year, then I applied for a pastoral job. So the pastoral job for being in essence, was a head of year responsibility for the year group of year 9, then year 10. Then I moved on with them into year 11. And then I was also appointed for a lead practitioner for behaviour. So I had the opportunity to then teach new staff about strategies and techniques and how to manage behaviour. So my journey at the academy since 2017 has been a progressive journey, but I've managed to be able to see the full end of behaviour. 18 months ago, I applied for our on-site lead alternative provision manager, and I was successfully appointed in that role. And ever so since then, it's just been a journey that we've had at the academy. And yeah, it's been really interesting because I've seen behaviour from where behaviour starts from, and where the whole managing a year group and then looking at learners who need more support.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as a lead practitioner for behavior, what's your job like then, on a day to day basis? What's kind of the shape of your day and what would happen?
So at the moment, my responsibilities are that I'm the lead for the alternative provision, which is the on-site. So we're probably amongst the very few schools in Bradford that have this. I mean, predominantly many schools up and down the country use the alternative provision route, which is normally your PRUs or external agencies. But Bradford Academy 3 years ago decided to invest in an on-site alternative provision to provide support for their young people. So in essence, instead of sending learners out, we then provide the support internally. So my role involves the day-to-day responsibility of managing the provision. We have a team of 6 people, very skilled people. We have teaching staff, learning support assistants, and then we also have 27 young people who we provide the day-to-day wraparound support for them young people at the academy. And all the learners that access our reset provision, which is what our alternative provision is called, are all the learners who access Bradford Academy but need additional support.
So, let me understand this then, Shazad. You take children out of the school and you bring them into your alternative provision, which is on the same site, is it?
It's literally 5 steps away from the main school.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a really inclusive provision that we've got. It was a £2 million build at the time. It was designed with the approach of having a trauma-informed approach, making the building feel inclusive, making everyone feel that they've got their own space, but at the same time making the building feel where it becomes a feeling of belonging to the people. So it's on the site and it's 5 steps away from the main school itself. However, we also access the school at any given time.
Okay, yeah. And did I hear you say there you have a £2 million build?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
It was. This is why it's when I explain this to people, and I've spoken about this in the past. It's like a big investment, but one of the reasons why I love working at Bradford Academy is the fact that the school's really inclusive. It believes in the young people. It believes in giving second chances to the young people, and I guess, to be honest with you, the way the behaviour is up and down the country, it's a really good support mechanism that we've got to have this alternative provision.
Yeah, well, in a minute, maybe we'll look at behaviour, in the broader sense up and down the country, as you say. But I suppose then 2 things maybe strike me about your setup there. One is, is there any sense then of the children who are in alternative provision with you? Is there any sense of either privilege or stigma? I mean, they're sitting in a £2 million building. That seems pretty luxurious to me listening to you. Is there a sense of privilege, or is there a sense of, being ostracized or, being kind of shoved away?
What it says is the learners who present the most difficult behaviour are those learners who still won't be forgotten about. And it will show that the school will continue to invest in those young people. It is easy for a school to look down the route of a permanent exclusion, but then you have an issue which becomes a district problem, where you've got a young person who now has been permanently excluded from an educational setting. But having a provision like this on site will provide another opportunity for a young person. The whole purpose of an alternative provision and the definition that is provided to all schools with regards to alternative provision is to provide a provision to young people so that they are able to reintegrate back into mainstream. So our alternative provision is really inclusive because we get to use the mainstream settings. We allow our learners to go in for lunches. We allow them to access school for an hour, 2 hours, even half a day. So what we're trying to say to people out there is that we will not forget about our young learners. We will give them a second opportunity, but we will upskill them with the issues that they were struggling with in the mainstream setting. So whether they were struggling in a classroom with 30 learners and now they come into our small provision where now you've only got 8 learners, closing the barriers to learning, providing them with the confidence and the self-esteem, and then integrating them back into mainstream. Provisions out there, unfortunately, it's an out of sight, out of mind provision, but the fact that Bradford Academy have invested on an on-site alternative provision, it still makes the learners feel that they feel part of the academy. It's no different, even though our provision is called Reset. Reset's an acronym and it stands for something, but allowing our learners to also be in this provision gives them the opportunity to reintegrate back in as well.
Tell us then, Shazad, what does Reset stand for?
So this is something I'm really passionate about. Reset, we've given it a purpose, we've given it a name. So Reset is a model. And the whole purpose of an alternative provision is that you need to reintegrate learners back into mainstream. So the Reset, the R stands for respite. So we know that learners, when they come into our provision, we need to provide a bit of respite for the learners. And we normally use this phase from 0 to 6 weeks, where we take them away from the mainstream setting and we allow them to come to our place, allow them to be familiar with staff, allow them to be familiar with the setting, and allow them to be familiar with other learners. Then we move on to the E, which is encourage. And what we do during this phase, which is normally 6 to 12 weeks, is we begin to build up confidence, build up self-esteem, begin to make the learners feel that they are valued. Then we move on to the S, which is standards. And again, it's making sure we've got the basics, the uniform, the data moving around with regards to the lessons, making sure our work is up to scratch. It's all about the standards, how we then incorporate standards so we're able to integrate back into mainstream. That's normally between 12 to 18 weeks. Then we move on to the E, which is equip. And this is where we begin to start closing barriers to learning. So if a learner was struggling in a classroom setting, this is now we beginning to tighten up the issues which the learners were demonstrating in the mainstream setting, and we begin to provide the wraparound support. And then we move on to the T, which is normally the 24 to 30 week stage, which is called transition. And this is where we come to the end of the learner's time in the Reset provision, and we look to reintegrate the learner back into mainstream. So it's a model, it's an acronym, it's powerful, and it's give the provision a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds very comprehensive. Yeah. I wonder if for a minute, could we be clear on behaviour? Because, behaviour is very much a broad term. It's all encompassing. It runs the gamut of, inattention, rudeness, cheek, disrespect, right through maybe, vulgarity, insult, threat, unruliness, damage, and so on. And, there's really no magic wand to kind of cast a spell over all behaviour and just have wonderful pupils sitting in front of us. So what is behaviour then?
If you're looking for a word, behaviour is communication. Staff in the Reset building are all trained around trauma informed, so we believe that behaviour is communication. We don't believe that a child will behave in a way without there being a reason. We believe that this is a way of them communicating with us. We then do not, the approaches that we apply, we look to de-escalate a situation through verbally, maybe through our body language. We allow the learners to speak to us openly so that they're able to feel as though they've got the relationship with us. And that's a key term, is relationships. And we believe that having and forming strong relationships, especially with the young learners that we work with at Bradford Academy, it's all about the relationships. Making sure the relationships are strong, making sure we listen to our young people and giving them the opportunity to feel valued as well. So our motto at the Academy is known, valued, understood and guided. And that's really powerful. We promote that. We get to know our learners, we value them, and we also make sure that they're understood. But the most important part is that we guide them as well at the same time.
Yeah. So what are some of the typical things that are maybe going wrong for these children then? What's happening to them? You say, that they behave this way because something's happened. What might it be going wrong for them?
I think what you've got to look at, and this is where the Reset provisions a blended approach. So we have young people who were the risk of permanent exclusion. So they've gone through all the support in school and now they're presenting behaviour which is unmanageable. We also support learners who are school refusers. We will support learners who have experienced mental health or trauma. So because we have a variety of learners who express a variety of needs, each learner is unique in their own way. So there it's them presenting to us the issues that they're going through, and it's either something that they've experienced in childhood, it's either something that they've experienced in a mainstream setting, whether it's in a classroom setting. But having an opportunity like this in the reset provision gives us the opportunity as first to get to know our learners really, really well. Sometimes our learners really flourish in being in a small environment. I mean, sometimes being in a classroom of 30 learners can be really overwhelming. But being in a smaller setting with 8 learners and 2 members of staff, they may feel more valued, maybe feel more confident. And this is some of the stuff that we apply and some of the support that we apply to our learners in this setting. I mean, the staff are always known about this, that we know that sometimes learners are going to get it wrong in the provision. We know that if we apply the policy, which is obviously the behaviour policy, we have an adapted approach. If we was to apply the policy, it wouldn't work. So what is the approach that we use with these young people? It's the relationships, and it's making sure that they're valued in the organisation.
Yeah. And what's the difference then between, you and your team doing that in alternative provision and teachers doing that in the classroom? Why can teachers not do what you're doing?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's because of the demand of the learners that are in the school setting. I think schools are really oversubscribed at this moment in time, especially in the Bradford district. I think schools were at a time when there used to be 20 learners in a classroom, then it increased to 25. Now some school settings are in a stage where they've got literally learners out of the door. So because we've had the increase in learners, it becomes difficult for the member of staff then to either they're teaching or it's behaviour management. But we have the opportunity to take the learner away from a classroom of 30 and give them the one-to-one support. And I think that's where we come. That's a strong point of the academy. I mean, one of the questions that I was presented with previously was that if a young learner is able to do this and they're successfully in your provision, then how do you remodel it with the member of staff when they go back into mainstream?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we also provide is we provide an exit strategy. So when the learner is with us for 24 to 30 weeks, we provide a thorough document which we give out to the members of staff to say, these are the strategies that are worked with the young people. For example, this young man prefers to sit at the front. This young man prefers once you have told the class what they need to do, then please can you go speak to this young man in person to just encourage him or just to see if he's on track. We have the capacity to do that. And also we've got the time, where I believe teaching staff at this moment in time don't have the time, whether they're inundated with admin work, marking, or it's the pressure of meetings or meeting deadlines. And I think that's becoming difficult. And it's also the workload on teaching staff, not just at the academy, but many schools up and down the country.
Yeah, I understand all that. Yeah. I'm just wondering, is it not really incumbent on teachers to teach in the context of a relationship with their children? Do they not need, to put relationship first before, teaching and learning? And I understand you talk about numbers, but, is that not absolutely crucial that the teacher has a really grounded relationship with the class before they can teach well?
I think I 100% really agree with that. I think relationships are the foundation of any positive classroom. However, I also believe that many members of staff will also have the additional pressure to make sure that they're making sure that they're meeting expectations with regards to grades, making sure learners have met the deadlines. What I'm trying to say with this is every school's different. Some schools will have learners who come from really difficult backgrounds, some learners who are not as academically smarter than other school settings, but it's about the school culture, it's about the school vision, it's about the school saying that, okay, we understand that this young person might not be academically smarter than some of the other learners, but we as a school will make sure we form strong relationships. And it's a bit of a sad state of affair to say that we will always judge young people on their grades or their GCSEs. And one of the reasons why I love working in alternative provision is to say, well, this young person now who was really had low self-esteem, who didn't like coming to school, maybe he or she didn't get the grade, but this young person now actually feels really good about themselves. We can actually send this young person out in the community who's grown in confidence. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we measure people by numbers. And that doesn't really, and that's one of the things that I really want to push through alternative provisions, to say, okay, let's not measure by numbers. Let's just measure by creating young, good human beings.
And what then makes a good human being?
It's having the right moral compass. It's also having the right principles and having the right morals in life. Kindness, being generous, polite, respectful, loving, caring. These are just some of the stuff that we promote, making sure that, you know, we're respectful to staff and students, to our environment. And this is kind of modeled through staff, through our behavior, because the young people look up to the adults for them to be role models. So staff, this is something that we promote at the academy through the reset provision, that we make sure we do this. And it might be that a child doesn't get it today, might not get it tomorrow, but as long as we plant the seed now, somewhere eventually the young person will begin to think, right, this is who I want to be, or this is how I want to be moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I wasn't a maths teacher, Shazad, so I'm trying to count your months really quickly there. But, these children are out in alternative provision with you for quite a time before they're reintegrated. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So it varies on a child specifically. So
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily, because they're 39 weeks in an academic year, it doesn't necessarily mean that a child will be with us for the full 30 weeks of that calendar year. What it also means is sometimes learners are able to integrate a lot earlier. Some learners are able to integrate at an earlier stage. It all depends on the young person. So we've had young people who have integrated within the first 6 months. We've had young people who have integrated within the first 6 weeks. We've had similar learners who need longer than the 30-week transition. So it's not a one size fits all. And I really like this model, because the model gives us a template to follow, but also at the same time, it allows the learners to be able to flourish while they're in this provision as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what about children going back in? Do they all succeed? Do they have relapses? What happens? Because surely the places in your alternative provision are limited. What happens there?
So yeah, we have a capacity of 24 learners. When we obviously divide that by the staff, it's 2 members of staff to 8 learners in a classroom setting. What we do come across is, so we have reintegrated some learners, and some learners have been successful and some learners have not been successful. But what we do is we have an open door policy, like a revolving door, where we understand that sometimes learners may not be able to reintegrate full time. So then what we do is we look at a bespoke intervention. So we say that we will allow this young person to go back into mainstream, and if it doesn't work, then they come back to us and we revisit the whole model again. For some learners, we have half a day with us in reset and half a day mainstream. Sometimes we have 1 lesson with us in mainstream and 4 lessons with us, or 3 lessons with us in reset. So we will always have that connection. One of the things that we also, an intervention that we promote in reset, is that we have an afternoon provision. So how our structure and how our models look like during the day is that we have 3 50-minute lessons. And this rate works really well, because after 50 minutes, learners do lose concentration. So a maths, English and science lesson rotated throughout the day. And then in the afternoon, based on the child's needs, we look at what interventions we apply. That could look like in the format of forest schools, hair and beauty, going to college, looking at motor vehicles, art and design, food tech. So we have like 26 different provisions, and each provision is provided to support to give the wraparound support to the young person, so that we're able to develop this young person, and then we're able to see improvements moving forward.
Yeah. So let me go back a minute, Shazad. What's the criteria then? What criteria would there be for a child getting a place in alternative provision?
So the criteria fall mainly under 5 subheadings. So what you've got is, you've got a learner who is at the risk of a permanent exclusion. So who's gone through the behaviour triggers, who's gone through the systems. So the pastoral support worker, the head of year, the lead for behaviour in the mainstream school have tried and have exhausted all options with the young person.
Yeah.
This is one criteria. The second criteria is somebody who's now just completely refusing to come to school, for whatever reason it may be. So then what we allow this young person to do is to come into the reset provision and say that this is a smaller provision, and slowly through the reset provision, we slowly reintegrate them back into mainstream. So it's like the first steps. Then the other criteria is somebody who's experienced either trauma or mental health, or they're struggling with mental health, and they need a short period of time with us, like a respite period, whether it's something that a young person is struggling through bereavement, or whether they've experienced something where they need to be taken away from a mainstream setting for a short period of time, or it's an exceptional case through safeguarding, where safeguarding have said this young person, for their own safety or their well-being of other people, they need to be in your setting. Now, the learners who access the alternative provision, it's through an internal referral system. So the head of years and the pastoral support workers, who are the main link for the young person, they make an internal referral. So they'll complete a document, the young person's name, why they're referring them, what's the support that they've had, what are their good points, what do they need to make improvements, and why they believe that this young person will benefit from this alternative provision.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to get my head around a little bit, would alternative provision, and you have a limited number of places, you've 27, would it be seen as a positive and a good thing? And I know it's an alternative to permanent exclusion, but in the main, would the teachers see a spell of time in alternative provision as something positive?
I think 100% yes. The feedback that we've had from teaching staff is that when they've seen learners integrate back into mainstream, they've actually said how amazing it is to see this young person who would not sit still, who would not stay in my classroom for the hour, and now be able to phase back in. The feedback that we've had from the young people to say, we really appreciate our time here. The feedback that we've had from parents, it's just been absolutely amazing. So it's positive all round. The students, the staffing. Also, the fact that the learners get to go back into mainstream, and we also have the same teaching staff that are also able to visit the alternative provision. It also shows the relationships and the fact that we're not just sending these kids into an alternative provision and saying, right, here you go and you're here. So the teachers also get to see the improvement. And then when we reintegrate the learners back in, it's also done really strategically. Which class the learner's going into, which member of staff's class they're going into. And the feedback that we've had is the alternative provision is a strength of the academy. The relationships that learners have with staff there, and the learners who access the provision, it's a strong point for the academy.
Yeah. And is it fair to say they're probably mostly, pupils that are further through the school? They're older pupils?
It's a mix, really. So we tend to not take any learners in year 7, as it's their first year in the school. So we allow them to see how it would be at the beginning of year 8 at least. So we tend to take learners predominantly in year 9, year 10 and year 11, with some exception to year 8 learners. And then we form 3 classes. So we form a year 11 class, a year 10 class, a year 9 class, but with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 year 8s in there. Because the classes are smaller, then what we do is we provide a lot more scaffolding with regards to the work. We have 3 classrooms, a lot bigger than what a normal classroom setting would be like, but we also then have a smaller classroom where we then take out learners from each classroom and provide them with a member of staff in a smaller setting. So having the capacity within the reset building, it becomes really, really important for their education as well, so they feel confident in this setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested in this business of teachers and maybe yourself. What's the relationship between yourself and the teachers in the main school, the main building?
It's really positive. It is really, really positive. The reason being is the staff are really invested in the whole alternative provision. It was difficult. It's difficult with regards to alternative provision in general, because the misconception that you've got there and the label that you've got there with alternative provision is that it's a place where naughty young people go, and it's a stigma that will always stick with alternative provision. And as time's gone on, what we've tried to do is change the alternative provision and label it as an alternative educational provision, which we still want to make people out there trust us with regards to we are just providing an educational provision for these young people. It's slightly adapted. So the staff are invested in this and they understand that this is a right thing for the young people. Our relationship with the mainstream staff is really strong because the interventions that we access in mainstream, staff are more than happy to take those learners back in and say, right, okay, we will give them a second opportunity.
Yeah. And, do you have to do any like kind of restorative work or anything like that? Because, teachers are human. They're well educated. Behavior can definitely go awry, and teachers do get hurt. They get wounded, and they get wounded by individual children, who may end up with you in alternative provision. And some of that damage and that wounding can be very painful, very hurtful. And, I'm just wondering then, is it difficult for some teachers to receive children back into mainstream? And do you do anything to try and mediate that?
Yeah, most definitely. Restorative justice and restorative approach is one of the things which was my kind of strong point as being a lead practitioner for behaviour. And again, Bradford Academy is situated in a very deprived community where we know that the rates of permanent exclusion, the rates of suspension are really high. So we promote with staff around repairing the damage and repairing the harm that's done, but we go about it in a completely slightly different approach, which is about repairing the harm and the damage that's done. So making the learner take responsibility for what's happened, but at the same time, member of staff understanding that they are actually serving a really deprived community, in a difficult community. And that's a really strong point of the staff that we've got there. It can be really difficult for staff.
It can.
It can be really difficult in the sense that how many issues will they be doing? How many authorities will they be doing? But it's really important as well that staff well-being is at the most important. It's at the front of your school. You have happy teachers, you'll have happy learners. You have happy learners, you'll have a happy school. So your staff are your biggest resource in the academy.
Yeah. Staff definitely are the biggest resource. Yeah. I just wonder what you do, Shazad. What do you do to convince young people? And you clearly do it, and you're clearly successful at doing it. What do you do to convince them to be in school?
We say this all the time at the academy. When you make somebody feel valued and when you make them feel loved, they will automatically feel part of the organisation. So when a child is demonstrating this type of behaviour in a mainstream setting where it's totally showing disengagement, for me, that's demonstrating to me that this young person has no affiliation with the academy, doesn't want to be there for whatever reason it is. You've then got to strip that back and find out what is the actual reason behind it, and then rebuild back up to make the child feel that every part of this school here, I feel part of, or I have a belonging in here. So if a child now sees that there's a bit of rubbish on the floor, because you've made that child feel valued and you made that child feel proud of the school that he comes to, he or she will then pick up that rubbish and throw it in the bin, or tuck that chair in, because there's a sense of belonging. And it's really important. A third of the day, a young child is at the school. So in essence, that is their home. We are their parents, making them feel like this is your home and we need to look after this together. It's all about the sense of belonging.
And, I'm absolutely with you on that, Shazad. But one of the things, drug dealers make children feel valued. Gang leaders make children feel valued. Better than that, they make them feel valued. Big men, hard lads. And they give them money. And they give them money for, doing their dirty work or whatever it is. How do you compete with that?
What they do is they provide momentary joy. What we're showing to our young learners is we're giving them a sense of belief. We're showing them the long-term plan. A case study that comes to mind, which was a young person who was going through similar stages, but he was a young person who was totally disengaged in school, was somebody who was referred to us with regards to he may be exploited to X, Y, and Z. And we had to work with this young man, and it was an exemplary. It was a really difficult case to be working with. This young man left with 11 qualifications. This young man at this moment in time is studying motor vehicles and it's a success story within itself. He was somebody who was open up to all sorts of stuff out there in the community, but now this young man now has turned his life around, and it's one example like this which we then can promote to many young people that come through our doors. If this young man can turn it around in his life while he was in year 11, look at the chances that you've got here. And it's that sense of belief again. A young person may not like to do maths. He may feel as though just because he cannot add up, he feels useless, or he feels like inadequate. But again, there's ways in how you can make that child feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, the key is to allow them or demonstrate ways in which children can value themselves.
Yep,
100%.
100%.
Yeah. Excellent work, but not easy work.
No, it's not easy work. I tell staff today, the day you plant the seed is not the day you're going to see it grow. It may take time.
I like that metaphor.
and it will take time. But what we don't do as staff is we don't lose hope. We continue, and some days sooner or later, you'll see your hard work pay off, and never be disheartened. It can be really difficult, and I mean, this is one of the things that I was talking about to people who I meet in the alternative educational world is sometimes you apply the support, sometimes you will go above and beyond, and there will be setbacks. There will always be setbacks. You'll think to yourself, well, I'm giving this young man a chance, he's taking it, and the next minute, the moment I look away, he's done something wrong again. But you don't lose hope.
Of course.
You never lose hope. Many people family members have walked away from the young person's life. You don't walk away from that member. You don't walk away from that young person, and they will remember you. We're teachers, we're educators, and we will come across young people who have left school, and they will still see us out in the community or at the shopping markets, and they will say, "Sir," and it's that level of respect that they've got. They will call you by sir, regardless of how many years are apart. But it's what you've shown, it's what you've demonstrated, and that's something that I think the alternative provisions it's a strong point of the alternative provisions out there in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, what's your view on, shall we call it pop culture, like rappers and things like that. And there's a lot of controversy at the minute about some of their lyrics, their videos and their lifestyles, and just this contempt for wealth and burning money and crashing Ferraris and things. And they would very much send out a message that a certain type of young boy should not be involved in school. School's useless, does you no good. Come over, join us. And they kind of tempt them. What's your view on that kind of culture, and how popular it is, and what it does?
I think the sad state of affairs is that young people are exposed to this on a mass scale, whether it's on the TV, on the iPads, or even on the mobile phone, or what they see within in and around their community. And it's very difficult as time is going on. More and more young people and younger people are exposed to this. They will look to this, and it's going back to my point I made earlier, they will look to this because they see this as this is a sense of belonging. This is what people will affiliate with being cool. This is what people will think. This is who they need to be. When they come into your school setting, it's really important that you also promote as your culture that working hard and turning up to school every single day and giving it your 100% is also seen as cool. Just because you see somebody driving a flashy car, because you see somebody wearing nice designer clothes, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the all end and be all. We've got to, as a school setting, show that there is hope in the education sector, and that you can go on and make yourselves proud, make your families proud. And that's the key point. It becomes really difficult. One of the things that we use external agencies who come in to work with the alternative provision. Some people who are able to share their experiences to say that we went down this track, we ended up in prison, or we ended up in a life of crime, and we don't want you to do this. And that's really it relates back to our learners, where they're able to see a live example of, right, guys, you don't want to do what I did. I mean, I use quite a few agencies who do this, and it's really effective with our young people. And the feedback that I get is, sir, you know what? I see, I hear from people saying it, but now I've actually seen a live example. I don't want to go down that route. And that's a reality check for many of our young learners. And the more the alternative provisions are able to reach out to external agencies, that are able to get guest speakers come in, the better it is. Even whether it's through one-to-one or if it's done on a mass scale through an assemblies, it's really key to help our young people stay away from many of the stuff out there in the communities.
Yeah. And I wonder, on a bigger scale then, does media and social media and maybe even specifically record companies, do they bear any responsibility for what they do? I mean, they must be aware that their videos, their music, and this, that, and the other is a distraction and, detracts young people off a straight and narrow path.
I think they know what they're doing, but nobody will want to take the responsibility, because with the responsibility, there will also be repercussions. And the moment you put your hand up to say that we are responsible for X, Y, and Z, then there's also accountability. So I don't think the people out there will want to take the responsibility. But as educators, it's our job to make sure that we show our young people that we're still here to support you. But this is how it needs to be done. So it's a battle forward and back. What we have to demonstrate as educators is that, this is one of the reasons why having an alternative provision is, and I say this many a times, he who opens up a school door closes a prison door. And this is by having learners come into our provision or come into a school setting. The 8 hours that they're there with us, if we can make sure that they're healthy, making sure they've eaten, making sure that they're educated, it's those 8 hours that we've made sure that they're away from the streets, away from the stuff that they shouldn't be doing.
And I don't want to labour the point, but I just wonder, Shazad, is it school's job to solve society's behaviour issues?
Paul, as time has gone on, school has taken on a lot of responsibility because of the demand, because of post-COVID. Schools have become really overstretched. Schools are now seen as social workers, youth workers, probation workers. School has taken a lot of responsibilities. But one of the strong points and one of the things that I love working in a school setting is that the school will never say it's not our job. And it becomes really difficult for staff because of the demand of the young people and the cases that are out there, the social services, the youth services, many agencies are now close to, they can't have, there's one agency which is they have a 2.5 year waiting list before any support is provided. So what does the school do? Do we just say we're going to wait 2.5 years? We don't do that. You say school will then again take on the case because you put the child first. So there's a lot of burden, a lot of stress. I would say it's increased massively since COVID because I experienced what it was like working in a school setting before COVID, and the demand wasn't there as much. But after COVID, it has become really, really overstretched. And I think our young people are experiencing this, and also our parents. It's really difficult for our parents who are trying to get the support from the external agencies and are being told that there's a waiting list, and then the pressure becomes onto the school. And the school, again, are taking on the caseloads. And I think a lot out there needs to be a massive round of applause for the schools and how much they're doing out there.
Well, I think, as you say, it's the nature of teachers, is that is what we do. We do respond to the need and the child that's in front of us, and we do try to patch them up. Shazad, we need to take a little break for a moment, but we'll be right back after these messages.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
SATs have made the news again as many media outlets report on allegations that children were distraught after the reading paper. The BBC website reports that parents and teachers of Year 6 pupils said the paper was difficult and that it had left some pupils in tears. In response to concerns, the Department for Education said it worked to ensure that all tests are appropriate. Whilst some parents took to social media to highlight concerns, a few also acknowledged that the tests might be good in a way to have some kind of tests before GCSE, but the schools in general are under too much pressure to perform well. Copies of the test paper cannot be published until all pupils in Year 6 have had the chance to take it. Sarah Hannafin, Head of Policy for the National Association of Head Teachers, said the union was very concerned about the paper and it would be raising concerns with the Standards and Testing Agency. In Scotland, Edinburgh University students have criticised the institution's response to a marking boycott. According to BBC News, students fear their work will not be read as the university plans to continue awarding degrees without necessary expertise to cope with the UK-wide industrial action. The marking boycott is part of the latest phase of industrial action by members of the University and College Union at 145 institutions across the UK. Union members are refusing to undertake marking duties and assessment-related work. In response, universities are considering a number of measures, including changing marking guidelines and basing final grades on work already submitted. Many students have expressed sympathy towards staff, but also frustration that industrial action has had little impact on anyone but students, as universities have not reopened negotiations. The University of Edinburgh said it has robust measures in place to reduce the impact of industrial action and that work, including dissertations, would be read. Schools Week comment on teacher burnout after a report from Wellbeing Service Education Support shows a quarter of leaders, teachers and support staff said additional responsibilities were adding on average 4 to 6 hours to their working week. 15% of staff said they were spending an extra 7 to 10 hours supporting pupils. The collapse in support services feeding into schools, including creaking mental health support and overwhelmed SEND services, has left schools and their staff struggling to cope. Jeff Barton, General Secretary of School Leaders Union ASCL, said schools had become the de facto and unofficial branch of social and healthcare services, but that a lack of training, resources or capacity was putting staff under considerable workload stress. The most common additional responsibilities included offering pupils and colleagues emotional support and dealing with difficult pupil behaviour. More than 1/4 of staff surveyed said they had prepared food for pupils who didn't have any, and 41% said they had purchased supplies such as pens, paper and school bags. In the same YouGov survey, 2/3 of school staff said public bodies such as CAMS and social services had been unable to offer pupils support. Further details of the findings can be found on the Schools Week website. The Guardian reported on a proposal to recruit school leavers into healthcare service apprenticeships, which would allow tens of thousands of doctors and nurses to train on the job. The NHS workforce plan could see up to 1 in 10 doctors and 1/3 of student nurses trained through this vocational path in coming years. The alternative route would circumvent the standard undergraduate or graduate route. The plans have been met with criticism by unions, but Amanda Pritchard, Chief Executive of NHS England, has been speaking to pupils at a North East comprehensive school, where she encouraged pupils to earn while they learn, and highlighted the 350 different roles available within the NHS. Finally, in Wales, the BBC reports that the increasing cost of food means school caterers are struggling to deliver on the Welsh Government plan for universal free school meals. The unit price was set with an assumption about possible cost increases, but Education Minister Jeremy Miles said the world has obviously moved on and a further review was needed. The current rate of around £2.90 per child in a primary school is being described as no longer viable, as price increases of 20% on items like milk, cheese, fruit and vegetables take their toll. The Universal Free School Meals Plan is being rolled out in phases to all primary schools, although a target for every child in reception Year 1 and Year 2 to be offered a free school meal by April has been missed. The policy has been welcomed, but challenges needed to be acknowledged. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I've been searching for crazy technology. The tech I found ranges from rather funny to actually quite useful. Let's see if I can blow your mind. Everyone has probably used Google Translate at some point, even if it's just to translate a word into another language and back again to see if it changes. Well, the Google Pixel earbuds paired with the Pixel phone allow you to switch on conversation mode. Now what is being said to you in a foreign language is translated into your earbuds in real time. What you say is translated and projected via your phone. You do need an Android 6.0 or higher to do this, but this has potential to be a game changer for communicating not only when travelling, but in hospitality too. Next up is a quirkier invention, Smarty Pans. There aren't many things you can't connect to an app, and the frying pan is now joining the club. The Smarty Pan has a built-in scale to weigh your food as you add it to the pan, a handle that tells you when the pan is at temperature, and the app guides you through how to cook a meal you're preparing. Also, the nutritional content of your meal is calculated by the app. There's no advertised price for this pan yet, but keep your eyes peeled. It replaces a cookbook, reading the nutrition on a packet, and your kitchen scales, as long as you fry everything. My final crazy technology is the Hush Me. This is an invention for those concerned about being overheard by others when talking on their phone or other connected devices. It works by muffling your voice so others can't hear you, keeping private conversations private. Genius, I hear you say. I need one so I can work during my commute. Before you break out the credit card, it is a rather chunky device you wrap around your whole head. I'd describe it as a pair of large headphones that connect to a cup to cover your mouth. At just over £180 and making you look like Darth Vader, you may want to do a bit of research first. Do you know of any crazy tech? Do you own any? As always, why not get in touch at TT Radio Official? I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com. This program.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I was just listening to Steve Woods there on his Tech Talk. I don't have any special tech or anything. I just have old tech, which we found out at the beginning of this program doesn't always work too well. It's not too reliable. Anyway, you're listening to the Thursday Lit Show with your host, Paul Hazzard. And this evening, I'm talking to Shahzad Ali, who is a behavior expert. And Shahzad, could we pick up then, is there any role for parents in what you do?
Yeah, definitely. I see it as the triangle approach, which is in the center of the triangle, you have got what is the best approach or what is the best thing. And in order for the parents to be part of this process, you have the parent, the child, and the school. Any one of those factors does not work, you're not going to have the best outcome for the young person. So the parent is really, really important in any process of the young person's school life. We make sure that parents are involved in all the process. The alternative provision world itself, it is a bit daunting for parents because in their mind, their perception is that a young child is being taken away from a school setting. How is their child going to work in this setting? It's given the parents the belief that their child will be looked after, their child will still get the educational that they're entitled to. But the most important thing is the communication. We still provide the parents' evening. We still keep parents updated weekly. But also we have like a parent committee, which is that we allow parents to be involved in decision making, just like we allow students to be part of the student voice. We allow students to make decisions. We allow parents to be part of this. And if you look at it from a deeper meaning, it goes back to my earlier point, which was that if you make somebody feel valued and part of any involvement, they will go above and beyond. So parents are really integral part of their child's school education life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. And I'm wondering then as well, particularly for the older students that you have, Do you see any role for employers? Like, for example, would you use like a work experience or any kind of bridging program from school to work?
Yeah, definitely. When we talk about the older learners, I refer to them being key stage 4, year 10 and year 11, but mainly year 11.
Yeah.
We know that they've had a difficult school life. We know that it's been difficult in a classroom setting. We know that not every child is going to want to do further studying. And we also know that it's not one size fits all. We know that some young people are better hands-on, practical stuff. And they've then got a vision for going straight into an apprenticeship route. So one of the interventions that we provide in the reset provision is what I class as VOQUAL, which is vocational qualification. So what we begin to do is we begin to look at our young people, and we begin to look at who's got an aspiration for being a mechanic. So then we look at the motor vehicle route. So we look at providers who provide a level 1 in motor vehicle qualification, or we look at young people who are interested in plumbing and electrics, and we've got external agencies that look at these kind of provisions and pathways. Successfully this year, we've got 2 young learners who really did struggle in a mainstream setting, and their academic profile was really low. One of our providers who provide an afternoon sessions and a full day session of electrics and plumbing have now offered an apprenticeship route for 2 of our young learners, which is a real success story. These were 2 young learners who on paper were risk of a permanent exclusion, who it would have labelled them for the rest of their life. They wouldn't be able to succeed in any other educational provision. But now we've, in essence, given them another opportunity in life, and they've got an apprenticeship route, which now they'll be able to earn money. So they don't need to, going back to what we talked about earlier, look at a culture of selling drugs or going out and doing wrong stuff. Now they're able to enjoy what they want to do, but at the same time, earn money as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Shazad, you have, and rightly so, you have painted a very positive picture of alternative provision in general, but in particular, the model that you've established there. What are some of the difficulties then that you face? Because it couldn't be, sweetness and light all the time.
No. The difficulties that we face is if you look at it from an internal perspective, it's that the provision is capped at 24 learners. Even though this year we've increased to 27, you've got to be able to, if you increase the provision, it means that the 24 in there are probably not going to get the same one-to-one support if you increase to 30 learners. So it's capped towards then. The end of the year 11 GCSE exam, year 11s will be leaving for their destinations, which will then open up 10 places. And surprisingly, for 10 places, I had 46 internal referrals. So it's about who's priority. But then at the same time, some of the other challenges that I face is within the Bradford area, where we don't have many alternative provisions out there, and you've got schools who are then trying to reach out to myself, providers that are trying to reach out to myself, local authority that are trying to reach out to myself to say, can you take on learners? And what we're trying to say to them is that we are an alternative provision that are trying to meet the needs of our own learners. Some of the other challenges that we face is young learners who require an EHCP, an education healthcare plan, to provide them in a school setting through additional support. And I've had educational psychologists who have come to our provision, and in essence, they say that we are a victim of our own our own success, and the fact that we are a walking EHCP, which is nice to hear, but it's not what we want. We want what is right for the child, because what you don't want is the young child to spend their whole school life in an alternative provision. You also want them to integrate back into mainstream. So it's the challenges that you get. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. The same child that's pleasant to you today may not be pleasant to you tomorrow. The same parent who was supportive today may not be supportive tomorrow. But the most important thing is that you understand why you are doing what you're doing. I say this to my staff: if you love doing what you are doing, then it's not a job. It becomes a hobby, and you'll be here without me even saying anything to you. And that is why I mentioned earlier that staff are also your biggest resource. We promote a family culture amongst our learners, amongst our staff, We understand that some of the other challenges that we may face is if a staff member is not present, what do we do? By having a strong culture, everyone tucks in together. We get the job done. Some of the other issues that you may face is finance. It's expensive to run an alternative provision.
It is.
It's really expensive because you're employing 7 staff in a setting like this, and then you're also reaching out to your external providers to provide, like, for example, forest schools, hair and beauty, boxing sessions. So it's a lot of investment. Not every school has the capacity or has the budget to do so. But the reason that I love working at Bradford Academy is that every child matters, and the school will always go above and beyond to make sure that they've invested in the young people, giving them a second chance.
Yeah. Shazad, how would you fare in an Ofsted inspection?
So, because we're not a external provider, we're an internal alternative provision, we still get graded with the overall picture with regards to behaviour and attitude in school. Recently,
so any assessment would not be separate?
No, it wouldn't be separate.
Right.
So we are internal. So if our school internally was graded good, then we would also be graded good. Vice versa, if we was graded requires improvement, then the school would also be required improvement with regards to behaviour and attitude.
Sure.
So one of the feedbacks that we got from the Ofsted, which was recent, when I say recent, it was the first week of January, and the feedback that was given was the learners who are the risk of a permanent exclusion or present the most challenging behaviour are well supported in the reset provision.
Goodness, you got more than one word.
We've got more than one word. So again, that's a reflection of the staff who have gone above and beyond. Without them, there would be no provision, and a leader is only as strong as his team. So credit to my staff who always go above and beyond, and also credit to the young people that are there. The feedback they gave to Ofsted, the relationships that they said they formed with staff, it was really positive. So it was good. It was a scene. When I spoke to the Ofsted inspector myself in person, it was very brief in the sense that we provided 2 really huge folders. One of the staff members, she always goes above and beyond, and she made sure that all the paperwork provided to Ofsted, because Ofsted will look for alternative provisions. Is there any gaps? Is there something that shouldn't be there, which is there? And making sure your paperwork is airtight. It's really important for alternative provisions to make sure that they've got strong relationships, like you've just mentioned now, with parents, to know exactly why the young person's there. And also, if any learners are gone externally, whether they're accessing college, to make sure the relationship with both providers is strong, making sure your attendance marks are in, and making sure communication is strong across board. So that was the feedback that we got from Ofsted, which was really positive. It was a strength moving forward.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. I know you're fond of including the word education with your alternative provision. Here in Northern Ireland, we actually refer to them as AEPs, Alternative Education Provisions. But I'm wondering, Shazad, do you think every school should have an AP or an AEP?
In every school, if you're going to promote inclusion, and you're going to say that we're inclusive and we provide support for the most vulnerable learners, then an alternative educational provision is the way forward. I think you guys in Northern Ireland are slightly ahead of us by rebranding and calling it an educational provision, because that's what it is. The stigma and the label that alternative provisions has been given over the years is out of sight, out of mind. It's places where young, naughty people go. And the importance, I mean, you guys have already done it in Northern Ireland. Keeping the word educational is so powerful. All that you're saying is that we still value this young person educational. The only difference we're doing is we're slightly making adaptations to their approach. And the adaptation is maybe in a smaller classroom, maybe with more one-to-one support, maybe with not an hour lesson, let's go to a 50-minute lesson and more check-ins. And if you take the word educational away from this, it doesn't hold the same value. It doesn't have the same purpose.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Shazad, we're coming towards the end of our time, and as is now traditional in this programme, I always ask, if you had a magic wand and only one spell to cast, what would you do to make education significantly better for everybody?
It's making educators out there believe that every young person out there is special and unique in their own way. Not everyone's going to be a doctor or a teacher, but finding what is the skill or what is that young person really good at, and then developing that as an educator. That is one of the things that I wish that could happen out there, and just believing in the young people. We were young at one point, and we believed, there is somebody in our lives that believed in us and continued working with us, and this is why we are there, because of their efforts. And having the same approach from all educators out there to continue to believe in the young people. They're our futures, and they'll continue to promote our legacy moving forward.
Shazad, your school and your students, your parents in Bradford are all very lucky to have you. Your enthusiasm, your knowledge, and your passion for what you do is absolutely infectious. It's been great having you as a guest, and I look forward maybe to having you a guest at some stage in the future. Shazad, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Join me next week for the second in a series of linked shows when I'll be talking to Dr. Aideen Slattery about how you can help your students pay better attention. See you then.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.